Welcome back, everybody, to Dissolving the Divide. Really glad to have you here. We have this beautiful background Derek's made behind us, and I'm Leslie Powers. We have Derek Bartolicelli. Hey, how you doing?
Bonjour, bonjour. We'll be speaking with Beth Martens today, which I'm really happy to have on. I've known about her work for at least since the dawning of the Rona, when you had the Freedom Summit with Matt Belair, I believe. You guys co-hosted that. And you've just been off and running with so many other projects. You released a book in recent years. You're like a coach's coach, as well as diving into the archetypes of helping people really discover or rediscover or repurpose their true life's purpose, in a sense. And so, yeah, really honored to have you on, Beth. You have a lot to say, and we got a lot of questions. So, how you doing over in the Great North?
Yeah, in the Great North, it's good. It's unseasonably warm here, so that's nice for us. After, as you know, I returned from Anarchapulco not too long ago, and just getting my feet on the ground. They're always running when I land. Somehow, there's too much good things going on, and I'm interested in all of that. So, but doing really well, feeling really happy and high on the connections that were made there, and my subject is compelling to me. I never lose interest in that, so it doesn't matter if energy waxes and wanes. I'm still fully engaged that way.
Yeah. So, in a nutshell, what is your passion?
So I could start with a little bit of a story that how I learned what that is, the passion, mission, sacred purpose, meaning of life. That's all the same thing for me. And 20 years ago, actually going on 25 years ago now, I have to say that in a different way because we've got almost 5 years behind us. I was diagnosed with a stage 4 lymphoma. I'd been working in the corporate world. I call it a corporate lymphoma with my family's business. I wouldn't have worked in any other corporation, but I felt a calling for a couple of reasons. One is that I wanted to help them it through a recession and bring some expertise, although I wasn't the expert at the beginning. And also, I wanted to fit in with society for a change because until then, I had railed against the machine and I'd suffered that a lot. So internally, I decided, okay, no more of that rebel archetype that was actually killing me when it came down. I'm going to fit in with society. I'm going to fit in with my family. I'm going to do things they approve of, and you might know how well that can go when you're going against your own nature. And so, in just less than 10 years, I faced that diagnosis. It gave me the chance to get out because, as much as I love my family and I didn't mind the work, I didn't like who I did it for. I didn't like the context that I did it in, which was always an unhealthy context. It was purposeless. It was meaningless. Every client we got, it didn't matter how much money was in the picture. It was for nothing in my values. So then it took me 3 years to recover. I was told I wouldn't survive. I faced what I experienced to be a near-death, encounter that taught me a great deal in that very, liminal place between life and death. There's a lot of surrender, and I let go of what I thought reality was supposed to look like or what I was supposed to be doing or how I was supposed to show up. And I took in, okay, God has a plan for me, and I'll get on that road now. So it was still a second diagnosis after that. The doctors told me I wasn't going to survive it. They recommended a stem cell transplant, which I discovered half the people die doing. So there I was again on the precipice of life and death, going, okay, God, what do you want from me here? And I decided that if it was my time, it was gonna happen with that gory procedure that took more than a year to even begin to start recovering from, or it was gonna die now. So I just allowed that fear to come all the way to my consciousness, which is a huge part of what I teach right now. I went through the worst possible experience I could have imagined in my own imagination, just to say, that's where all the gore mostly happens. And then I came out of it with an incredible amount of energy from awakening primarily that rebel archetype, seeing that, yeah, that's an important part of myself. If I spend all my life energy suppressing it, that's what was killing me. So I went from dying to living practically overnight. My oncologist didn't want to hear about it. And yeah, he even took his own life a year later,
Wow.
just showing how desperately useless they must feel in their profession. That's all I can say.
Mhm.
So
Where
then,
some of the treatments cause some major problems,
oh
right? I
boy,
mean, it's
oh,
a
and
hard, yeah,
problems you didn't have. Exactly. Knowing what I
yeah.
know now, I would do it really differently. But
Hmm.
that's what inspired me. I knew when I recovered, I was not gonna go back to the world of business as I had known it in that, corporate setting, but neither was I gonna go out and get a job because I had been born and raised by entrepreneurs, and I wanted the freedom and the personal power of that to be able to make my own decisions. So I started and just giving some of the work that I had learned. I went to India 8 times. So I started teaching yoga and meditation, teaching about the archetypes, doing some workshops, playing music as you were asking about my instruments
Mm,
in the background, doing concerts, writing my own music, recording. I have four
mm.
recordings of my own music now, which I really forget to tell anybody about, but they're there.
That's
And
awesome.
yeah, on iTunes and Spotify and all those places, if anyone's interested to hear my past life.
Wow, yeah, cool.
Yeah,
Mm.
we'd like to play some with the recording possibly.
Oh, yes, of course,
Yeah,
of course, yeah,
yeah,
I'll lay all that on you after, for
yeah.
sure, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing your story. And I'm curious for you to expand a bit more on the gore of the imagination, right? And what you discovered was important part of your recovery work was what was happening in your mind and how that relates to this archetype uh, work.
You're right, so, over the course of the years after recovering, I set myself the task of decoding what happened because it was so fast. I was in a state of some desperation, like, "God, please tell me what's killing me. I can't find this out even though I'm doing all the right things." And so, within your own thoughts, within your own imagination, I saw how basically, this is how I'll express it, that God is listening to you. And whether it listens to your conscious thoughts in the imagination or it listens to for lack of a better way to say that, the listening comes from mostly the unconscious, what we're not aware of, what we're not actually experiencing, and what we will say is not there because it's hidden from us. It might not be hidden from other people so much. That's the joke that God plays on us, that we're often able to see ourselves in the mirror of others. But that was, where I was able to start grasping how it'll sound a little bit like law of attraction, so you create what you think, but it's really not simplistic like that, and when you try to will the thoughts, then you're actually suppressing the unconscious imagination and very much the programs. So this is something this is a very big mission for me, to get people to see that there are programs that root in the unconscious. And that's why you can't just think positive thoughts and have positive things happen to you. And that the goal of life is not to have all positive experiences. The goal of life is to grow, right? And that can be gory in and of itself. There's the pain of growing and the pain of injury or suppression or depression or all, in many different ways to describe that pain. But that's what we're here to go through. That's why I talk about the hero's journey. It's not just a nice little walk through life and we're hoping everything goes our way and we get all the things that we want. It's, couldn't be further from the truth. So then, yeah, the gore of the imagination will play out. It will, if it's in there. And that's not to scare people, but it is to maybe create an invitation that they could start, instead of having life always mirror that for you, because when you got the gore in here and then it happens out there, it's like you don't see it until it's out there. Well, what if you had the ability to start inside and
Hmm.
discover,
Hmm.
and yes, everybody chirps, know yourself. Yes, know yourself. But what then? When you know the gore in your unconscious, how do you actually deprogram the unconscious and start letting yourself see, know, feel, experience, and very much heal what's out of alignment.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Good
yeah.
questions.
Yeah, I teach I'll just quickly say also, I teach a technique called worst case scenario, and it's
Mhm.
what everybody doesn't want to do, to play the imaginations out, to let the worst things happen in your mind, to go through it, to feel it, to, people have very, deep and very dark experiences this way. It's not a beginner's technique. It's not even something I recommend necessarily trying on your own the first time, because if you don't go the distance with the technique and, ultimately, I'll just say it, allow yourself to die, because that's the goriest imagination that we have. Most people think they have no fear of dying. Every single day, someone tells me, "I'm not afraid to die." And, for the brave souls that do the work and look in, they realize it's kind of like a mushroom under the forest floor. We don't see it, but it's continuously popping up results. And, people run from death all day long. I was running from death when I was sick with cancer, and it wasn't over then to the degree that I faced my death. I'm still doing that every single day. So, if you allow your imagination to go right to the very end, the
Yes.
worst. You let it happen, you come through it, you see, like, "Oh, wow, I didn't die. I just
Yes.
I just experienced death."
Hmm.
But you start to make that distinction between what is death really and what is the experience of death.
Hmm.
And
Yes.
mhm. Yeah,
Like
so
cutting to the chase to your greatest, deepest fear that is operating subconsciously in how you live your life. Right?
exactly. And the punchline is that's why we're controllable. That's
Mm-hmm.
why we can be
Yeah, fear
manipulated.
based. Yeah.
Exactly. It's all the fear that, is being pumped out, not just from our controllers, but from our own people are
Hmm.
addicted to fear, and they spread
Yeah.
fear. It's why I appreciate how you guys are doing your podcast and approaching these subjects, because it's going right to the solution side. Where can you actually have breakthroughs about this? Yes, to some degree, fighting out there in the world. I'll support anybody who's doing that. But that when you do the work primarily here, it makes everything outside so much easier.
Yeah. So you're there in Canada. And through these last few years, I'm sure you saw a lot of that um, gore of the imagination and ways that archetypes and fears of death played out. Do you mind just sharing, updating a little bit on the Canada experience and where things are at?
Yeah, absolutely. It has been gory here. And, we were in some ways hit nearly harder than anywhere in the world with the pandemic. It was
Mhm.
a real knock 'em down. We did have the illusion that everywhere in the world was like us, but because I'm
Mhm.
connected with a lot of people around the world, you very quickly learn, like, oh, they were special somehow. And, the nature of communism in Canada has been growing for a very long time. As you know, they're not necessarily in a hurry to get
Mhm.
results. They're planting seeds. It can be, even many generations. We had one of our last prime ministers, well, our prime minister right now, Justin Trudeau, and then his father, they call Castro, but Pierre Elliott. That's many years ago. That's in my earliest childhood. I'm remembering my father talk about him like he was a communist, and you can see these things trickle down very slowly over time. Every little control, maybe they're making you wear a seatbelt, or they're making you, all these little regulations continuously mounting, more and more taxes, more and more, um, control over the people in general. So when the pandemic hit, it was like the boom came down. It smashed its people. Everything was closed and locked down, similar to other places in the world too. We weren't the only exception. But the first thing that they did was to, change the gun laws and to start restricting firearms, which, not surprising, everybody's suddenly signing up to get a firearms license, because that's like, oh, we might need to protect ourselves, not from an enemy, but from our own governments. And so that was the part that woke my son up. I'm so grateful because he has an interest in that area, and he was finally like, "This is." Can I swear, by the way?
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
he was saying that, like, "This is bullshit. This doesn't make any sense," and he started having discrimination and, um, yeah, so, some all the normal things that we went through as far as not being able to get into a grocery store without, um, muzzling yourself, and I went
Mm,
through a few different incarnations around that. I think I wore a mask for 2 weeks because I didn't wanna fight anymore. I was completely traumatized by the fight. I had been smashed and abused, and I thought, "Okay, Beth, just, don't die on this hill. You might have a long road ahead of you to die already," and then I couldn't live with myself because I was so completely out of alignment, and I turned things around, got myself through that little mini trauma that I had experienced. So, I went back on the fighting side, and I also, through my podcast, The King Hero's Journey, started to support a lot of people, not just in Canada, but around the world. And then, it took, I think, 2 years before restrictions started to lift. We had the Canadian Truckers Convoy here, which seemed
mhm,
like an incredible beacon of hope. I have never cried so much when I saw the people across the country, and these were normal people, right? Not, not
mhm,
rebels, not anarchists, not anything. It was the grandmas and the grandchildren and everybody in between standing up going, "This is wrong." So that was very hopeful, but the movement was completely co-opted by a bunch of shysters,
mm,
which to this day are still broadcasting their fundraisers and, telling their lies and being all inside out, upside down in their own narrative, not even being able to get their own story straight. Nobody either notices or nobody can care, or they're so well supported it doesn't matter. And so this became a major fascination for me to start tracking controlled opposition.
mm,
As you mentioned, we did the Law Summit, Matt Belair and myself, trying to find what are the solutions. And
mhm,
in the process, we found a lot of gurus and a lot of controlled opposition, like mostly.
mm.
Unfortunately,
Oh,
most of those interviews, right, I had to take them down because of that. There's only so I know, and that's how I learn is I get somebody in front of me, I ask my questions, I ask hard questions, and then I can come to some conclusions. Have
mhm,
finally created a system now for other people rather than me being the one that I just, keep repeating like a robot controlled op. So I created a system of the archetypes of controlled op,
mhm.
because that
Oh,
is one of my gifts that I can see patterns. And
yes.
I'm a girl, so I'm not the heavy researcher, not to say girls can't do that, but it's more coming from my intuition, from my
Mhm,
interactions, from
mhm,
observing the behavior, from
mhm,
just
mhm,
simply tracking when they say, "Oh, here's a perfect law document for you to get out of this situation." And then you
mhm.
look at it and it's a bunch of garbage
Yeah.
and it makes no sense. So that's my mission right now,
Mm,
that people could recognize for themselves.
Yeah, Beth,
mhm,
and it was really interesting hearing and great. I was listening to you on Off Planet Radio with Randy Muggins. Great conversation.
Thank you.
And if anyone wants to learn more about Beth's journey, you go a little bit more in depth with him. And one of the things that I was really, I was like, yes, fucking right on. I love when people say this is, like you've been, awake and aware about certain things for a long time in your life. But, as far as like getting the brass tacks and the vocabulary and all that stuff, that's kind of outside of ourselves. That's another thing. But really just being able to tap into yourself first and foremost. And then you have those, outside confirmations. It's like there's something within you that's just connected to, people want to say, akashic records and that kind of stuff, or you're connected to that oversoul that can just have that inner gnosis that can just have that activated intuition, if you will, that just has that inner over understanding of things that just are ineffable, beyond our current understanding of things.
Yeah, you
So
said
yeah.
it exactly, Derek. That's my process. I do the work inside. I see inside first, and then I'll go out and start, seeing, okay, is there any evidence to back this up? The intuition is not infallible, but I do notice, especially over time, that to the degree you have deprogrammed the unconscious fears, the more clearly you can discriminate. When you see who or what is in front of you, you're more seeing it than you are just seeing your own lenses that you're seeing through.
Mm,
Because it's like we have a box on our head. When we're afraid, anybody in front of us is going to be either the enemy or the savior.
yes, yes. And
And
then we can become paralyzed with the not knowing and just shut it all out.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a great point, because being paralyzed with not knowing and wanting to know is one of the primary core unconscious programs.
Mm,
So we're all trained with our intellect to go and, whether it's crack the books or think it through and figure it out. And when it's driven by that program, you pretty much never do figure it out. You're in that place of paralysis, or you're
mm-hmm.
spinning your wheels so hard, not getting answers, or even you're getting answers, but they're not satisfying. They're leaving you with a very depleted energy and
Mm-hmm.
being useless to yourself.
Right. Or more questions, because you can go endlessly down rabbit holes and miss the main points.
You
Yeah.
got it. Yeah, you got it. Yeah, rabbit holes. That's the
Yeah.
Then endless arguments because these rabbit holes can be
Mm-hmm.
endless, and yeah, this is kind
Mm-hmm.
of what Leslie and I are trying to bridge these gaps, and kind of get people to kind of lift their heads out of these rabbit holes, kind of see things for what they are, wipe the crust off, whatever, as well as their relations with others, because of just like that tunnel vision down that certain rabbit hole, not being able to like. And I don't know if you noticed, but people that are highly into, I'm not going to say conspiracy porn like I normally do, but just like that are delving into a lot of conspiracies and all this stuff. They seem to be having like a detachment from compassion in a sense. Like they're moving more towards that black pill type of attitude or that kind of stuff. Have you noticed that? And also, it kind of reminds me of that one archetype of the hedonist in a sense. I don't know why that came to mind, but does that make sense?
Oh, interesting. So I hear you about the detachment from compassion. How some of them are, they may or may not know they're doing it. So I can't just point fingers and go, you're doing something wrong, and let me set you straight or anything like that. But it is part of how, whether you're the one being scared or made angry, right? It's not just that lower vibe of fear, but the higher vibe of anger. In order to be saying that all day long, or in a podcast, or putting that message out, you yourself, yes, your audience is going to detach from compassion, and you yourself will definitely detach from compassion, because if you have no way to release and heal from the injury of what you're going through, then the feeling of it is so overwhelming that you're not going to touch it with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah.
So that's what happens. We either completely avoid what I call the door to freedom, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's
Mm,
it's
mm-hmm.
it's not like it's garbage and you got to get away from it. It's
Mm-hmm.
actually your path through to freedom at any frequency, any level.
Yeah.
But yeah, that detachment is more often the more like I'll just get away from that, or the second option is to get lost in it. And that's
Yeah.
where you get consumed by all of the negative emotions, so to speak, although that's a loaded statement right there, negative emotions. Now I'm curious, Derek, when you talk about the hedonist whose addiction is to pleasure, whose shadow is pursuing pleasure instead of purpose, how do you see that hedonist come up?
Uh, yeah, just it's just satisfying a certain routine of people kind of, all right, we're gonna be watching these ones now, and just taking in all this information and not kind of repurposing that and kind of rippling that out and sharing that information, creating their own material, artwork, content, whatever,
Hmm.
in a sense. And yeah, hedonism, I don't know, sometimes I feel like folks can become almost like a little morbid or seeing the future a little too bleakly sometimes, and like wondering, what's the fucking point of it? What are we doing
Let's
this for? That
escape.
kind of.
I sort of see it as an escape mechanism,
Mm,
sort of for maybe from that sense of hopelessness or overwhelm. in the world, and then finding, an interaction, a way of seeking pleasure, or creating a reinforcement cycle through interactions with others that becomes the focus, getting the likes, getting the views, getting the laughs. There's all sorts of ways that people, I think, escape and avoid, like, that door to freedom, right? Because of those repressed fears and fear of discomfort. Like, this is an uncomfortable process.
It really is. Oh, that's
Yeah.
very subtle. You guys nailed it. That's amazing. Yeah, very very subtle seeing, because I might not have been the first archetype I was thinking of there, but yeah, it's
Mhm.
when they're driven by emptiness, and when the escape is the pleasure of, like you said, the likes and the views and the laughs, and they don't have to actually manage and work on their own inner pain or brokenness or emptiness,
Mhm.
then yeah, there becomes, I like how you say, the reinforcement cycle of going out to get, could be approval from people, or a sense that you have control over your life, or avoiding death another day or something like that. So yes, that escape mechanism, and then that very dark place of finding, it's kind of like when we are driving by an accident and there's, blood on the street, and we want to look at that. Why do we want to look at that? That's the same kind of morbidity, and I believe you're right. It is that hedonist archetype. So well
That's
done, you
hilarious. I gotta say real quick because I'm in the process of like doing a video I recorded the other day talking about, I don't know if anyone's heard about this before, but it just clicked in my mind. Like, it's a form of like digital rubbernecking. There's like, whatever accident, whatever the
Mhm.
elites or controllers, manipulators, whatever they, spice they want to, stir into the pot that, got people going crazy. Oh, like, we got a gazillion fucking memes right now of a cop shooting a fucking acorn because that happened in big fucking deal, right? And speaking of memes, whatever. Have you seen that one meme that talks about like, hey, I've been doing my shadow work. I posted a meme or two about shadow work today, and mission accomplished type of thing, So it's like that externalization and escapism in a sense, and just kind of like, yeah, kind of being pretentious about this true fucking path work sometimes, It's like, it is real shit, and it will be uncomfortable at times, but there's certain humps we can get over, and it could be some real smooth sailing, It's just really upping the ante and leveling up within yourself and getting more into the flow instead of all that ebb with, respects to the law of rhythm and all that jazz.
Yes.
So it's like there's we're living in a very corrupt and confusing time, and so we talked a little about, like, all of the trickery and the manipulation, like in Canada and around the world. So how can people transform, in this time of external oppression, manipulation, purposeful distractions? How can people use these archetypes and self-awareness to, I guess, rise above, or go through that gate into true growth and purposeful, meaningful life right now? It's a big
Fantastic.
question, but
Mhm. Yeah, fantastic
yeah.
question. So in some ways, the as you might have seen, not everybody went down during, if we just look at the last 4 years. Some did go down, and they, lost their work, and they lost a home, or they lost all of their family. I also lost all of my family over this, and there
Mm,
there were a lot of losses, and there was a point where um, I thought, okay, it's over now. If all the work that I have created over the last then 20 years, it's over now. I'm gonna start prepping, and I'm gonna, just live on savings, and put my head between my knees, how we say. But in about 5 minutes of crying on the floor, I decided, you know what? I have never laid down to die. And that was, I think, the case for many people, especially in the truth community, where yes, there's an injury and there's some trauma from that injury, no doubt whatsoever. I think many of us trauma bonded because of it.
mhm, mhm. Yeah.
Uh, but because in my world, I hold a belief that everything is rigged in our favor if we make it so.
Mm.
not just because that's like, oh, something nice to believe and then you feel better. It's that, can you take the adversity? Can you take the wrong thing that just happened to you and transform it, right? So one of the archetypes that I write about, the last on the hero's journey's name is the alchemist. Yeah, you're already on it. That's amazing, Derek. And so then that calls you to a great sense of self-reflection, a great sense of what you were saying about earlier. The answer to it, Derek, is greater responsibility, greater maturity, a sense that if this is going wrong in my world, what is it in me that I could not just heal from the wrong, but I could find that in myself. I could come to a greater sense of inner power, because the only reason we feel powerless is because it's all tied up in our unconscious. We're pushing it away rather than receiving it. It's so incredibly simple, although difficult, because we have a lifetime of patterns to live down, and maybe lifetimes of patterns. I don't really go into that so much because I have no proof whatsoever, but there's a lot that works against us. Now, one of the things that our controllers bank on is that we rise above the injury, we rise above the adversity. But what ends up happening is that injury and the internalization of that adversity is still there. So, and that's why I created the King Heroes Journey podcast, because there's so many of the King Heroes out there, very high functioning. They can take a lot of hits. They have resources. They have, people in their world, and lots to offer and receive. But when they rise above the adversity, it is of enormous cost. And so at some point, those kings will crash, whether it's in their health or relationships, or maybe it's their own, career or finances, or the relationship with God disappears.
Mhm.
So that's where I have my mission, to help the, more in the truth and the freedom movement, that are not afraid of a boogeyman virus, that don't just say yes when somebody says you have to do this. We have different problems, higher up the scales of frequency. But that's another one of my big, like, for example, at Anarchapulco, where I did a talk on ascension myth busting. Excuse me just for 1 second. And so the ascension is something, it's very tricky because it feels good, right? We love to be higher energy. If you're in apathy, you actually will appreciate grief because you can feel something. If you're in fear, you'll appreciate that you're not in grief anymore. If you're in lust, you'll appreciate that you're not in fear. If you're in anger, you'll appreciate you're not so low as all of those other emotions. And then it goes up the scale to pride, extremely hidden. We all get stuck in pride like crazy because we don't see that about ourselves. And then what we consider to be the higher, positive, desirable emotions of courage, acceptance, and peace, finishing the scale at the highest vibration of peace, then we think, oh, well, I'm good now. I did my work. Here I am, all courageous. I can do stuff. I'm not railing against the machine anymore. I am, a keto. I'm taking the enemy's power and I'm turning it on them. So that's my particular mission, is to show people how not to scale frequencies. Because, and by the way, I'm going to be offering a recording of my talk from Anarchapulco, so that
That's
your
great.
listeners, if they sign up with me, I will be sending that out.
I signed up.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Thank
Oh,
you.
you
That's
did
awesome.
already? Okay,
Thank you
fantastic.
for
Yeah.
that, because it's about the
Uh,
only way people can access it, unless you want to pay a bunch.
right now, that's correct. I do recommend the whole series because there were
Is
phenomenal.
our connection? So if I just to kind of back up, you're saying about helping people to not scale the frequencies, not to kind of be on this like goal of trajecting towards feel good or the high end of vibration, but to embrace all frequencies. I guess if you could expand a little bit about what is the trick to not getting caught in that higher and higher feel good kind of path.
Yeah, great question. So it is natural to want to raise your frequency. Say you're in grief, that's a lot of pain. You can't go on indefinitely in grief, and the will be there, and I believe naturally there to rise up into a place of at least courage where you can,
Hmm.
because people can heal from courage, even though it still represents a loss of energy. So what I discovered is that, and it's from myself, of course, ascending, right? Eight times to India. I had enlightenment on the plan, and in a lot of different ways through my work and other avenues as well. So what I noticed is that the more I would rise in the scales, and they're spirals, so it's not just one scale and you're done. They are infinitely created, but in both directions. So as you rise, first of all, the work becomes more difficult because it becomes more invisible, more subtle. You don't have things blowing up in your face. So you don't have that, somebody shaking you going like, Beth, there's something wrong. You figure this out. And then, and then in reality, if you don't suppress, it's also exposing and likely creating the low end of the scale at the very same time, because this is my because, or I asked God why, and this is what God told me, that the playing field of the human journey is level. So it doesn't matter where you are on the scale, you have the same door to freedom, right? So that's, I think the Bible says, and for lack of better or worse, I'm not a card carrying Christian, but just that the thief can get into heaven as well as the one who's virtue signaling, and sometimes the thief will go easier than the virtue signaler because of that high virtuous energy that they're blinded by.
Mm.
And then the second part of your question to, how do you get off the map? Because I consider the scale of emotion and the scale of archetypes that I write about in my book Journey to be a map. The purpose of the map is to not just know who you are, but where you are on that spiral, to find yourself and to be able to recognize the patterns of those spirals that are inherent in nature. You can find them at every level. I often, I just have this seashell by my desk as a way to, just illustrate how nature naturally contains information in spirals. And then something happened, at Anarchapulco, which was so fantastic for me because, have, I've known this, but I didn't have a way to articulate it yet, and it's like, boom, that was so good for me. So I was talking to Matt Presti, and he covers the work of Walter Russell, which I have not studied in depth, but I know that there is a fair amount of overlap between what I'm working with, which is good because if you're finding the truth, you're going to find it in all arenas through all paths. Truth is truth, right? And so he's talking about frequencies and how people get trapped in frequencies, and that God, if we call God, we have no words for this. We're sort of at a loss. God, freedom, clarity, clear seeing, that kind of thing, um, is not on the map of
Mm.
emotions, of archetypes, of any vibrational existence or experience. God is not on the map.
I never thought about that. That's
So
interesting.
this part I knew, and then what Matt added was that's a different level there, but that God is no frequency. God is not a vibration. God is not a high vibration, and that's the big mistake.
Mm.
Everybody's chasing a high vibration,
Yeah.
and so all they do is spiral up.
Hmm.
They miss the true source. They miss the true freedom, and they get tricked.
That's fast. That's really powerful, actually. That thought is very big game changer. And like,
I know.
yeah, yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, yeah.
So I think we're in a way talking about two things. I actually recently interviewed, I don't
Well, in a way, you know, I suppose if you recognize that a particular vibration is not is not the destiny, it's not the purpose, but to understand the journey through all of the vibrations and to know that you are something separate from all of that, that's like an human experience, you know, negotiate, you know, sort of negotiating and managing your own power, you know, but is that the end goal? You know, it's like maybe something more. I don't know.
Yeah, so I think what people don't know that they haven't been taught is that this is our operating system.
Yeah, like
The
our
same way.
technology.
Yeah, exactly. So you sit at the computer, you're at the helm, your
Mhm.
computer more or less listens to every command you give it and just does that duty. And so we haven't been taught that. We should be taught that
That
in kindergarten, that you can, um, you know, you're not at the mercy. Say if we use emotions, they're the easiest one. If you try to track thoughts, they're so fast, they're gone by the time you're tracking it. But emotions being in a much slower realm, maybe a water kind of element, they are much more trackable. And so we're not at the mercy of our feelings. We're not at the mercy of our states of consciousness, which all have vibration. And so here's the system that God created that we should all learn in kindergarten is again what I was talking about before. You are we're making two mistakes: to get lost in the vibration, to become consumed by it. That can also mean we're embracing it in that more sort of like new agey kind of way, which I don't adhere to at all. Or we avoid it and we don't feel, and we actually end up vibing low and high at the same time, because you can be in peace and apathy at the same time. When you go up the scale, apathy is next after peace. It's the next higher vibration. And so by having the basic understanding that this is your operating system, it listens to you. And if you tell it either consciously or unconsciously with messages that I'm going to die, nobody loves me, I'm not in control, I can't do something, I won't win, I'm not good enough. These are I'm naming some of the core programs. Then your system is like, okay, right? Okay, you're giving me these instructions, and then I will act accordingly. I will manifest accordingly, and your life will manifest accordingly as well. So when you turn it around and instead of taking instructions from hidden programs, which have been installed usually since before we could discriminate and continue to be installed every single day we cooperate with fear, then you give the instructions. You are the one. So it's, it definitely is a process of using the higher mind to discriminate. The program will feel like it has power over you, and people will talk about it like it's something separate from them. Now, this is tricky because I'm often in the realm of, rather than describing exact reality, I'm talking about techniques that work, because we have so many inversions. I'll just quickly say this. We have so many inversions weaponized against us. It's including our own inner experience, highly inverted. Why are we listening to a basic artificial intelligence give us instructions when it's really our life force in that artificial intelligence, and we're tricking ourselves into the separateness? So sometimes it's like this, it can be useful to think of the program as not you, or it can be useful to think of the program as something you're doing that is you, that you have control over.
Yeah.
And yeah, go ahead.
I've been at points in my own journey where I came to that awareness that of the power of my, I guess, my thought, feeling, action, you know, center point, right? That consortium of power, and being terrified about not knowing what to, so to speak, pray for, what to choose, what to embody, you know, because a fear that I would choose wrong or that I didn't know or have enough information. And I'm wondering how might you help someone through that type of crossroads, you know, and where do the archetypes fit in, I guess, too?
Yeah, great question. I help people with that fear of power all the time. it's not very new knowledge if you followed any New Age authors and stuff that we fear power much more than we fear not having power.
Mhm.
And that is, if you're right away wanting to talk about archetypes around it, there are two primary archetypes that I call primal archetypes. They are so together, they're really not two, so I call them one. And you won't be surprised, it's the masculine and the feminine.
Mhm.
So they're kind of substratum. I offer a course called Primal Power, and it's exactly that, to find the power on the other side of those archetypes that are um, giving the very core message that either you're not going to survive this, you can't survive this, you have no power, you'll die of that, or that you have all the power you need, an unlimited source of that. It's a little bit tricky because of the ascension madness that we've been conditioned and indoctrinated about. So power is easily mistaken, like the true power, again, vibrationless, not the like, oh, I can take on the world. And my talk at Anarchapulco was showing the two programs called I Can't and I Can. And so the I can feel like authentic power, but not necessarily. So that's just a little bit of a deeper level to it. So the main process is to experience what you haven't experienced before inside yourself, that all of those vibrations are stored the same way that our body will put toxicity off. Like when I was sick with cancer, I had a big tumor here. My body was smart enough to put the poison here and to put a nice case around it so it didn't hurt the rest of my body, until surgeons came along and they opened that thing and I was sick nearly to death right away. And so that's what our unconscious does as well. As a young child, you don't have the nervous system to go through a lot of the major things that we experience, even the most benign, never mind where there's actual harm intended. We don't have that nervous system, so we put it off to a time when we do. And you probably know it, those things call on you. They don't leave you alone. One way or another, they're going to get your attention through, bad relationships or things that are not positive for you or not growth oriented. So by being able to first see that it's there, oh, there's a pocket of held energy. Ah, I didn't see that before. What is the nature of that energy? What is the signature vibration of that energy that is clearly recognizable? Now, this is not something you can think about. You can hear all these words, you can even memorize all these words, and it's not going to take you into this particular realm. So at some point, you have to drop that higher mind and allow yourself to, sometimes I'll say, like, just experience that fear, or could you be on fire with that fear? Could you be like actually one with that fear that you're holding right now? Could you study it? Can you see? Can you hear what it's telling you? Oh, it's telling me that I'm not going to survive right now, that I'm going to die right now, or I need to want to die right now, or I need to want safety. And so you're like, oh, okay, poor thing. Now I see you. I look around. Actually, I'm not dying. Nobody's trying to kill me. And now I can make a new decision. I can turn the table. I'm the one giving instructions. I'm the one um, being there as a presence rather than being run as a program. And so then you make a conscious choice. You talk to, this is all stuff I teach in my courses and my training. So you're getting a bonus here. And then because our system listens to us at every level, then you can say, oh, you're free to go, or whatever instruction, or a simple question to yourself, could I let this go?
Yeah.
And your system's like, oh yeah, you can.
Yeah.
To varying degrees. I always put out for people to work with me, if anybody's like listening and is interested in doing some of this work in my House of Free Will by my private association. Then I will vet people very carefully that they have done already a lot of work on themselves. So they're not new to turning inward. They're not new to assuming responsibility for what happens in their life. They've come through challenges, they've overcome challenges, and they're ready for next level, for lack of a better way to say it.
Yeah, totally. So if anyone wants to click on the QR code, it's linked directly to your website actually, and they can navigate and find the free will. Sorry, I forget the name, but
That's okay. The House of Free Will
House
is
of Free Will.
also
Yeah,
there. Yes. Thank you for showing my book. I appreciate
yeah,
that.
totally, for sure.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
going back to fear real quick, and I'm gonna make a steer in a different direction because I'm looking at the time. We got a little less than half an hour. And I wanted to get back just to real quick to Anarchapulco. If people aren't familiar with that, it's an event. It's been going on for like 5 to 7 years now. I want to
10th.
say
This was the
10.
10th
Damn! Oh
anniversary.
wow, yeah. There's been
Yeah.
Wow.
some prominent names of truth speakers, even folks like Ron Paul and libertarians and those kinds of people. Benny Wills from Joy Camp. I love that cat. And they
David
recently
Icke,
had a thing on
Wolf. Yeah.
HBO, the showing, oh, these are what anarchists are doing in Mexico and all this stuff. And that was kind of contrived, obviously. And they showed, like, some negative aspects of it and highlighted that for the fucking drama, put the Hollywood spin on that jazz. So, Beth, I'm curious, and I'm gonna say this real quick, and you can remind me if you forget. But as far as like fear and people like on this path and like people that have been researching stuff, have you noticed that there is quite that fear within people to still admit that, oh shit, some of this stuff that I researched was wrong, kind of stuff, like, oh, like things with like the QAnon psyop or other controlled opposition and that kind of stuff, which I wanted you to get into with those archetypes, which was, one of your main things that you spoke about at Anarchapulco. But did you notice when you were there at Anarchapulco, if I didn't ask enough questions, right? Was there any divisiveness? Did you see people argue about certain topics? Because there's the flat Earth community, which is obviously kind of infamous at this point. That there's been button heads with whatever in truth communities, and we've seen ruptures of certain movements within that truth seeking, speaking, all that jazz. So yeah, what were your observations?
It's a great question. For the most part, from my observation of circles that I was in and conversations I was part of, it was extremely collaborative. So you get, and I was, it can go either way. I was there in 2020 before the pandemic. That's when I published my book 5 minutes before that happened for that event. And then so you've got all kinds. Nobody is all one way. But what I was noticing, and for sure the people I was hanging around were very, very cooperative, very supportive of each other. They would listen to each other. I only heard a few times where a speaker was literally preparing for their talk and talking about it, and then someone else would undo their theory right in front of them, like, oh no, that's not true, and that's not true, and that's not true. So I did see that one time. And I'm like, "Oh, that's cruel," 'cause the timing is a little harsh there, and no one's going to agree on everything. I love Matt Presti, but at the end of the day, he didn't wanna know about my work. So he's like, "No, I'm good. I'm done. I've gone far enough in my work as I wanna go," and that's okay. Divisiveness, I really didn't see at all. Flat Earth could have been, what do you call it, a point of division. But I know David Weiss fairly well. It's the second time that I've met him, and we hung out. And he is a broken record. That guy, he literally cannot talk about anything else. There's no normal conversation for him at all. He even made me promise to mention his talk and my talk, and I did find a fun way to do that. Fun for me, that is. And so I'm not really seeing that. They're so grown up for the most part at Anarchapulco. Even though the word anarchy is in there, it's not what you would think of the stereotype of the young and the raging and the angry and creating division at every turn. There's no there are people like that, and they I did sort of see it come up against. There were people who didn't like me for some reason. Why? I don't know. I had no history with them. I couldn't. Even my mind is still trying to figure out the what was that about. And but I just gravitated towards people who are much more cohesive and cheering for each other. And then the way they cheered for me, I didn't expect, I'm extremely shadow banned in my media channels and my interviews, and I don't even know who my audience is. They'll cut the comments out,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
uh,
Your YouTube channel was deleted last month or something, right?
exactly, I lost the
Yeah,
whole entire channel after
I
a
feel
Yeah.
few
you. I've been there
interviews.
too. So yeah.
What do
Right.
you think is the points that led to that? What were the things that made the censors angry?
Well, it was the last 2 interviews I did on the archetypes of controlled op, I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Well, let's hear more about that.
Yeah, so that's maybe a little touchy subject because that's it's so many characters, especially in the Canadian show. I mean, everywhere. Actually, I shouldn't say especially, but I'm more aware of the characters in the Canadian show. And so there comes that point where you realize, oh, this person is talking about solutions that I finally find out they have, in fact, never implemented, or they went to jail over it, or there's people that they are guiding and instructing and selling solutions to that they are going to jail or they died or just seeing all these weird things. There was a ton of infiltrators in my groups. I had several law groups. I had Telegram is a good place to find me if you want to interact with me, by the way. And there was always some what I now call a well poisoner to come and waste people's time and to create division, to see solid relationships and make sure you wedge and break those people up one way or another. And we're very vulnerable to personality disorders. So it's like shooting fish in a barrel for that. And so yeah, over the course of the last 4 years, it kept resolving in my mind as archetypes because I'm seeing the patterns. And while I cannot definitively say they're controlled up, you will hear me say that. So I'm in a way talking out of two sides of my mouth because there's a certain part of me that's certain and there's a certain part of me that's uncertain. And this was the punchline of my workshop if I'm sharing all the goods with you guys that is the masculine and the feminine. The masculine is certain, the feminine is uncertain. And then what is to be done with that ultimate opposition is to marry them, and this is something I'm gonna teach as a free gift for people. So if they want to go to my website and sign up with their name and email to get the stage recording of my workshop on the archetypes of controlled op, I will also include, over the course of might be up to 2 weeks, just still getting my feet on the ground, but, the method for dissolving the opposition between those poles. And so I discovered 8 primary archetypes, and they are, from the Candy if you want a quick lowdown on who they are. So there's the Candyman we talked about, the selling of fear and anger and how that's addictive and people and they know that, and it's a kind of and they can also lure with fame and all kinds of things. Sometimes I've been approached by certain people and they're like, "Oh, Beth, you are the best. We're going to make you famous. You're going to be responsible for all this freedom people are going to get." And I was lucky enough I didn't fall for it. I'm just like, "No, I can see you are blowing smoke up my butt and there's no bona fide reason for that." So I was fairly invulnerable to that. There's also the grifters that they see the money making opportunities that scared people buy stuff. And especially solutions that appear to work, especially solutions that are either too good to be true, too easy to be true, or the immensely complicated, expensive things that people buy, six-figure solutions with controlled op. Oh my gosh, it is off the charts, right? There's another category I call Satan, which are the ones that actually sold their soul and they have a deal with the devil and they have to lead people astray in order to stay out of jail or keep their appearance of freedom, keep their appearances. And I might almost have to open a list of the rest of them. Give me a second. What else do we have? So the well poisoners I talked about, the troublemakers. We also have the copycats that they just see what other people are doing, and as a yeah, here they are. And then they just do the same. So they can be fairly innocent. They're just thinking, "Oh, they got a lot of views and that's their message. I'm gonna go and make that message the same." I also have a category called the clowns, and they weaponize the truth against the person who would otherwise digest something real and true, but because they deliver it like a clown, yelling, jumping up and down on their desk, throwing the table over, all the drama and everything to ultimately discredit the truth and make it look ridiculous, make anybody in the movement look like they're an idiot. So that's a
Reminds
big
me of someone, and I think you spoke about this a little bit. You touched on this with Freeman Fly most recently, I want to say.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I was tuning in on that live session. That's cool. I don't have Rockfin, and actually Rumble is censored off of in France. I can't
Hmm.
access it.
Wow.
Funked
Wow.
up. But yeah, anyways, I didn't. I just wanted to insert that real quick. But yeah, continue on. This is
Yeah.
really
I find this fascinating, by the way.
yeah, totally.
I feel that this is useful.
Yeah, and
Oh, good.
like I
Awareness.
can recognize certain patterns too. Like I love what you stated. Introducing this way of observing things and recognizing the energies and the ways people go about things, the approaches of yeah. Like I love how you're breaking these down and have certain categories or whatever, right? So yeah, cheers.
Right. Yeah, and it stops being personal to just call out the person. Although we did that fair amount in the workshop, so you're going to hear that in the recording because people always want to know my opinion on this person and that person, and I can't hold my mouth either.
Mm,
Um, another one
yeah,
that I
sorry,
didn't
man.
mention. Another one I didn't mention is the high-end hookers, the prostitutes
Yeah.
that are, they have usually, in my mind, they have been successful to a degree before the war more obviously began, and and then so they have so much to lose, and they're never independent. They depend on sponsors and they depend on funders and who are ultimately controllers, so they have to take people sideways. It can be in very foundational ways, it can be in very subtle ways that you don't know are foundational, and they again flip and flop their narrative back and forth, and one day they're this, they have this position on the jabs, and the next day they have another position on the jabs, and so they're completely inconsistent, just being literally pushed and pulled by the money behind the scenes. That's a really big list I've got of high-end hookers. We talked about Satan, and then there's one very invisible one called handlers.
Mm.
You don't see them, you don't meet them, you don't know their name, they don't talk on podcasts or do interviews or anything like that. They're more behind the scenes under a dark hood. So I think I got all 8 of those in the mix there.
Yeah, this is great. And this, I mean, this plays in so perfectly to these people's plans of the divide and conquer strategies. And so, how do you see, and like, we can be started, thinking more solution oriented. Like, how can people navigate, through all the mire and the muck and whatever the fuck, the misinformants, the disinformants, and the whole nine, like you laid out. How
Mhm.
can we, because this is obviously, wedging, certain communities that are looking for like valid information and stuff, right?
Exactly. So that's where I go back to, rather than being the one who just goes and says a bunch of names, and at the end of the day, I can't know somebody's head and heart and motive. I can't know that. I can only barely know my own. How hard that is to know your own if you think you can know somebody else's, right? So that's why I created first the archetypes, and I also made a list of, I edited it down to 30 signs of controlled op. So you can see what are some basic things, and it can be around, production level of video or images or messages. And it can be around like, there's 30, so there's a lot of them. I'm including this in the gift for anybody who signs up just with their email. I made a description. So again, it's growing your skills as a pattern hunter and to learn to see like, okay, every time I go and I turn on that person's information channel, and at the end of it, I feel like garbage. I am without motivation. I'm without inspiration. I'm without clarity. I have anxiety now, or I have depression now. And then you start realizing, well, is that serving me? So yeah, they may or may not know they're controlled op or they're in a role that has the pattern of controlled op. but what's the purpose of your life?
Mm-hmm.
So we've been tricked into following all these gurus.
Right.
And God was determined, because I was following gurus too. I've been like, okay, send us somebody that can be the hero in this situation. We're in danger. We need help. But not very long into the way, I remembered my own work and was reminded, like, at the end of the day, it's always us. It doesn't mean we can't help and serve each other. Absolutely. That's a very big part of my paradigm. But nobody's going to be the hero on your journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Really good how you brought that around back to our own sense of self-knowledge and discernment, right? And that's really where the path begins and ends. It's always coming back to self. And so what are some of the general direction to finding our inner purpose?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because I put myself to the task, was it last year or the year before, to create an actual course on something that I often took for granted people had some understanding about. And I remember one day I thought, oh, I'll just ask my people on my email list who would like to learn about sacred purpose. And I had this huge number of people put their hand up. I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't know it was. I honestly just took it for granted because I've been whittling away at the subject for many years already. So I created a system particularly for, I'll say, our kind of people, that they're not going to take poison injections. They have more actually masculine energy, more predator energy, which is the feminine to the feminine prey. And so we have a different kind of capacity. I would teach this course very differently to normal people. Actually, I wouldn't teach it to normal people. They won't get it. But no offense there. But it does require some strength of your own nervous system, and that you have faced some hard things in your life, not run away from them. So I've created a process and a system which is very not mystical. It's very practical. And it demystifies a lot about purpose, because we have all these understandings that everybody's seeking for something that is, first of all, hardwired, right? Like if you were born and you're a living, breathing soul and you haven't killed your soul or become completely separate from your soul, then the purpose is already encoded there. So how to begin again, I'll share a punchline with you, that it's a process of elimination and seeing everything that you've attached with that is really not you. By letting the programs go, it automatically, the purpose is always there on the heels of the healing. As soon as you start to overcome, you want to help others overcome. And that doesn't have to be complete at all. So those two journeys are the same journey, working on your own challenges and trials and tribulations, and working to bring it to others.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, stripping away the negative knowledge, the mind control programs, the stories you've bought into that are tricking you, right? And then I think also similarly in terms of clearing out your body, through healthy eating and maybe staying away from media. There's all sorts of ways. It's like stripping away, taking away, so that then you can sort of attune within maybe and listen to your own body technology, which I think guides us to what's true and real in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Exactly, because another word for purpose that I've mentioned from the beginning is to grow, right? The purpose of life is to grow. And then there are very specific things that condition us through particular archetypes that are closer to us. Maybe in a family context, they're more your immediate family, where archetypes are universal, so everybody has all of them.
Mhm.
That makes your inner life incredibly complex. So the work of archetypes in purpose work is priceless, because you get to see in a kind of short form, based on the work of other people that have already decoded to a great extent. And that was where I was at a loss when I was sick with cancer. It's like, okay, like I know I'm not doing well here, but I cannot say precisely what is killing me.
Yeah.
And as soon as you can be precise, you inherit the gifts to the next level, and you see the shadow to the next level. So you can receive what's there for your creative power that will naturally express and grow. And then you'll see exactly what you said, very, very beautifully played back to me, about how just seeing what's not you, and oh, that's taking my time, taking my energy. It's
Mhm.
not giving me what I want, or it's giving me what I want at such a high cost, it's not worth it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then the evolution of purpose over time, how it's
Mhm.
very easy to see backward, but we're all on a kind of plank, walking off the plank like there's nothing, when you get calls to greater purpose,
Yeah.
which is the first chapter of my book on the child archetype,
Yeah.
where
Very
the
cool.
calling is.
Can you give a real life example of that process a little bit of that you just described?
Yeah, so the evolution over time, say if I just use my own life as an example. So when I was working in the corporate world, I knew it wasn't my beautiful purpose. There were things that fit. I love communication. I love writing. I love, um, you know, getting a message out where there was no message. But again, because of that context, everything, it was out of alignment, because your purpose is not just what you do, it's who you do it for.
Mhm.
So the who of the purpose is a very
Mhm.
big discovery. Who are my people? And not because they're possessively my people, but who are my kind
Mhm.
that I can relate to? That's one of the reasons I love Anarchapulco, because when I go there, they like me. And that's
Mhm.
not always the case. I try to be as nice as I can, but there's a lot of people who I'm polarizing.
Yeah.
They either like me or they hate me.
Mhm.
And so when you tap into people that are more copacetic, more harmonious, more you can create together rather than always bump up against each other,
Mhm.
then your chances of living your purpose go up exponentially.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
you can't have purpose while you're just sitting alone in your living room. It's not like that. It is about how you serve your humanity, how you receive from your humanity, how you give to them. That complete circle, again, that masculine feminine archetype is always at play on the whole of the journey. And so what was was there a second part of the question, or did I answer?
Yeah, I think it's we talked about um sort of recognizing what's not you, so to speak, and pulling out. So, in your corporate journey, there must have been signals
Oh, the
when you
example,
went
yes.
to work, right? Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So then I had all those signals and I got off on a rabbit track. But so again, given that choice, what am I going to do now? I'm alive and I have all my capacity, and so what am I going to create in my life, right? So that's that massive part. We are tasked to create. Creating is growing. And so I grew into this then new role as a meditation teacher and a yoga teacher and a workshop leader and a musician and a performer and all of that kind of thing. So it was a step in the right direction. But it was just a step on the evolution of purpose. Yes, it was much more satisfying, but I knew for a fact it was not the be all and the end all, and there was something more. So then I trained as a coach. I never saw myself as a coach, but the reason I was interested in that was because it's such a big category that has no restrictions or regulations on it. And I'm like, yay, you mean I could do whatever I want? And I won't have to get hung up on this, like teacher thing. It's pretty, people would come to me and they just want to stretch their hamstrings and they don't care about the deeper side of life and purpose and the hero's journey. And so I evolved my work into a coaching practice. And through it was able to impart a lot of the tools and techniques, how to use the archetypes, how to, on a daily basis, be able to observe in your own life, in the people around you. It's an amazing way to decode relationships, by the way, if there's any mysteries that you have in your relationships. And so it evolved that far. And then in the coaching world, I was able to bring my work to my next level. It wasn't until my both my parents passed away in 2015 and 2017 that I started to see my work with archetypes might be more meaningful in a kind of systemic way. And that's when I tuned into the hero's journey more as an archetype and less as a kind of intellectual thought process.
Yeah.
And so Yeah. Yeah.
That's
So
cool. So not everyone's got to be like, oh, I got a Joseph Campbell to shit or whatever, right? So they, yeah,
exactly.
I dig
Yeah. And
that. Yeah.
I can't stand that book anymore. I read that book in my anthropology degree. But it's trauma-based mind control. It's one of the goriest books you could ever read. It's disgusting.
Damn.
I yeah, it's I couldn't continue
We
with
actually
it.
had a recent person guest on, Stephen Mager, who has this book he put out. So it's cool. We're journeying through such wonderful guests that are authors of just some really cool stuff that correlates so much of part of these solutions, and it really calls forth that self-empowerment and really taking responsibility for yourself, being your own savior, right, and not looking externally for that crap, whether it be politically, religiously, and even like extraterrestrially, whatever, but
Yeah,
those aliens are gonna save us, right, or or annihilate us.
exactly.
But looking at the
Exactly.
hour, how much time do we got?
Do I have room for one final question?
For sure. Absolutely.
Ooh.
So this is bringing us back to this idea of not chasing the frequency, right, up and down. And as you described your process of kind of progressively finding the right fit, the right purpose, right? How do you describe the feeling of sort of knowing you're there, or the way of measuring you're there,
I love this.
compared to those like chasing the bliss,
Oh man, you asked the $1,000,000 question. You nailed it. That's amazing, Leslie. Um, So, yeah, great question. And then also, just to finish the example of how purpose evolved post 2020, instead of laying down and dying, I decided I wanted to train people in what I do, because I've been what I consider to be incredibly successful, not because of the thousands of people but everybody I work with that is willing to do the work, they have breakthroughs every time, and I'm so satisfied by that, and I've by that point, I'd put in my probably 10,000 or more hours doing that work, and then so I created a coaching training to then teach other people how to do it, and this put a huge amount of work on my plate to then decode, and I'm still working on it, though I'm now finishing my 5th training in 4 years of groups going through and graduates coming through. So you can see again the evolution of that very same thread of purpose, the thread of freedom throughout it, that's my highest value. I'm always going to be working to get that myself and to help other people get that as well. And how do you know? So this is the best question ever. The difference between the bliss and the freedom that has really no word. We talk about freedom like we know what it is. Everybody's got their own meaning. I can't define that for anyone. It in and of itself is an evolution. Freedom and purpose are the same thing to me. Freedom and purpose are the same thing. So you know it when the hedonist goes from being addicted because of their emptiness to just the pleasures of life, where it's an empty pleasure and it only costs you and gives you pain and recovery, compared to the purposeful pleasure that gives life and beacons in technicolor, and God throws all the breadcrumbs to say, like, you're on track. See, all these beautiful little things just happen that you couldn't have engineered or sometimes even thought of, how perfectly things can go. So there are signs. People also get addicted to those synchronicities, which is not correct, because if you only rely on those, you're going to think, oh, that's not my purpose because it's hard, because I,
Mm-hmm.
because I have to work, or I'm struggling, or I got a setback. And so that's a trick. And
Mm-hmm.
so, now I would describe it, and this is not easy, but to know the difference between a vibration and no vibration, to know the difference between no vibration and apathy,
Mm,
where there's numbness and no feeling.
right.
So people can trick themselves like, oh, I'm so enlightened now because I don't feel anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, that's the lowest human state you could possibly be in. And so to recognize, and it's, to me, the communion with God is freedom, that direct relationship. One of my favorite ways to pray these days for again, lack of a better way to say that is like, God, are we in this together? And then I have this kind of experience I can't describe, that like this enmeshing, this communion, this oneness
Yeah.
with my creator. That doesn't make me the creator and then I dominate everybody and I'm the sovereign or anything like that. But it's that there is wind behind your sails. I have a colleague that I worked with, Daniel David. I am is his performing and stage name, and he talks about the part in the Bible where God is hovering over the waters in the first days of creation, as it's written about in Genesis, and how it's this the spirit impregnating the waters, and the experience of that, the direct experience of that is again unnameable, but it's knowable. If you know it and I know it, we can share it. We can talk about it. We can
Yeah.
experience it. Yeah. So it
Yeah.
takes a lot of discrimination. That's the thing, to be able to see the difference between a snake and a rope,
Yeah.
and at increasingly more subtle levels.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point. And one I've heard recently about understanding even like morality, it's there's an experiential element that you can't exactly describe to people who haven't experienced it. But I think about it as, you brought up the words like oneness. I think of the word alignment, and that, and connection, and expansion, that seem to indicate uh, like being in the flow of something. I don't know if I'm describing it. But,
Yeah, the flow comes and goes, but God never does.
yeah.
So
Okay.
that's also the part, so
Right.
it's the honesty with yourself. Like, yeah, I love this flow. Am I attached to this flow? Am I clinging to it? Am I afraid to lose it? Those are all the things that can happen around flow. Or, oh, I'll just pretend I'm in flow now because I'm not experiencing that anymore.
Yeah.
And so, it is again using the map of the scale of emotions and the archetypes to get off the map.
I love it. Yeah, this definitely will require more delving deeply and experiencing this process. So I just want to
Yeah.
encourage people to dive into your work, and I'm very feeling more and more drawn to discovering it as well. So yeah.
Yeah. Tap into that multidimensional GPS within your heart, Need
There
an
you go.
old crusty map, but anyway.
Exactly, exactly.
Right, right.
Yeah. And if anyone is listening and they would like to go deeper into this work, I always will open my calendar for a one-on-one conversation, just to talk, to get to know someone, to see where they're at, and see if they could get the benefit of this work or not. Right. I'm every year I'm tightening my vetting skills so that there's no, because it creates conflict for them too when they can't necessarily take the work on yet. But yeah, so if anybody would like to take me up on a one-on-one conversation at no charge whatsoever, because I'm just open for that. It serves me, it will serve you as well. Then you could email me my website. I did just actually create a contact form there. I shouldn't say my email because it gets picked up
Mm.
sometimes by the wrong thing in the cyber world,
Yeah.
or even yeah. Yeah, but yeah, you can just hit the contact form there, let me know, and then we can make a time for that. There are a number of courses, if you don't mind me saying, that you
Please, yeah.
can take part of. I mentioned Primal Power is there as an online course that you could also do with coaching. So if you're looking to experience that power that is not the vibration of power, but the true source of it, then those 5 archetypes are a priceless self-study. There's, like I said, the Find Your Sacred Purpose course, which you can do on as just the online, or you can get it with coaching. So there's some guidance along the way. My next training for coaches is going to start in September this year, 2024. And it's not too early to talk about that. People are already enrolling, and there are a limited numbers of students I can take. I'm also working with apprentices now in that training. So I've got 5 apprentices that are themselves learning to train the trainers so that we can expand and work with more people over time.
Awesome. That's great.
Exciting.
And we'll
Yeah.
provide all the information you want to share with us in the show notes, of course. Yeah. Canada, what's good? Much love to Crip
Beth
Vic.
Martens.
Yeah, of course. And yeah, your colleague Amanda Vollmer. I got love and respect for y'all up there. And it sucks for me, like coming from America and like being in this abroad for like a third of my life, over a dozen years, and wondering like I don't understand why there's this American bias, like acting like the big brother bully to our northern neighbors a good amount. It seems and just poking jabs of poking fun and all that jazz. But yeah, what's up, David Whitehead and all them other conscious cats, Matt Belair, and my sweet dear friend Raven Spirit, and yeah, much love
Nice.
out there, y'all.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the Canadians. I love the Americans, and they psyoped us to hate Americans. I don't hate Americans anymore. I think they're smart, and I want to live in America.
Yeah, there's a lot more things that unify us than
Yeah.
divide us. I think
Yeah, exactly.
we can relate to a lot much more. So yeah,
Yeah.
Beth, thank you so much again for spreading your wonderful knowledge and experience with us. And yeah, Leslie, any last words?
Yeah, I just appreciate you being here and all that you offer. I know that we've had you on our radar for a while for our show, and I think this was perfect timing. So thank you for being here. Lot to offer.
Fantastic. I'm honored. I totally appreciate being able to talk to you guys, and you ask really good questions, because sometimes the topic is a little esoteric, but I can see that you've both done some deep diving yourself.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
Yeah, we try to keep it fresh and have this different approach to people that aren't really necessarily used to. So switch up the format, make it more of a welcome doormat. But yeah.
There you go.
Anyway.
There you go. And since you still have my book up, if you don't mind if I
Yeah.
mention, there is a code right now. I'll tell your people that if you use the code REBORN, you get 10% off of that delivered to your door book. So if anybody wants to do that, then they can use that code.
Awesome.
Cheers.
All right.
Reborn. Noted.
Okay.
It'd be bethmartens.com/reborn, something like that, right?
No, you would
Or no, it's
either
not
use
that.
yeah, either use that QR code that you've got there, or just go to the tab that I think it says My Book.
Okay,
And
yeah.
then when you're checking out, when you're making the purchase, use the code REBORN, all one word, capital letters, and it'll give you the 10% off.
Okay, cheers. Yeah, I got mixed up with Randy Mogan's Off Planet, but that was like 4 years ago. But anyways, yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
He's been on my radar too. I love that guy. But yeah, much love, Beth. Much respect,
Thank
and
you.
yeah, continue and keep on doing the darn thing.
Yeah, we'll see you around.
You guys as well. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Ciao.
Big amounts of support. They don't get the big sponsors because they're not singing the right song, or they don't follow the narrative, or maybe they got there and it's partly organic and partly engineered. And then, if they don't want to walk away from their career, and they don't want to walk away from all the money and all of the influence and have thousands and thousands of people unfollow them, then they have to toe the line, or even at the cost of thousands of people unfollowing them.
Yeah.
And so who do you think are the high-end hookers out there?
Right. You start to look at people like Joe Rogan, right? Or
He's on
Dr.
the- he's on
Fauci,
the list.
right? Yeah.
Right.
Put
right.
Rogan and Fauci in the same list, right? Just opportunistic people. Amazing investigation. She tracked Russell Brand down and got the inside skinny. So I have
Okay.
to talk to her about that.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I should be interviewing her. And then I like this, Derek. Rogan is low-end hooker.
Yeah. It's tough, because what happens a lot of times is people want to have attention, people that can speak for hours and hours and hours,
and so on, and therefore, and such and such.
That's true.